On my 40th birthday, my wife gave me a gift box. A few minutes later, my brother called me and said, "Don't open it, that gift." I asked why. "Can't you see?" I looked closer and froze. I didn't open it. Instead, I did this. 10 minutes later, police arrived. The morning light was streaming through our kitchen window like it was trying to apologize for what was about to happen. I sat there at our little breakfast nook, the same spot where I'd eaten cereal as a newlywed, where Miranda and I used to share the Sunday paper and laugh about stupid stuff. 40 years old as of 6:47 a.m., and honestly, I felt pretty damn good about it. Not like those guys who freak out about hitting the big 4-0, buying sports cars and leather jackets they can't afford. Nah, I was comfortable in my skin, comfortable with my life. The coffee was that good dark roast Miranda always bought from the fancy place downtown, the kind that costs twice what it should but tastes like heaven in a mug. I was savoring it, really taking my time, when I heard her footsteps on the hardwood. She always walked differently in the mornings, softer somehow, like she was trying not to wake up the whole world. That was one of the things I'd fallen for 10 years ago, the way she moved through life, like she was dancing to music only she could hear. "Happy birthday, Tyler," she said, and her voice had that sweetness to it, that honey-smooth tone that used to make my heart skip. She was holding this sleek black box, about the size of a shoebox but fancier, tied up with this silver ribbon that caught the light just right. The kind of wrapping job that screamed expensive, thoughtful. The wife who loves you spent real time on this. I grinned like an idiot. "Ah, babe, you didn't have to do anything special." But inside, I was curious as hell. Miranda had always been good at gifts, not the practical stuff like socks or tools, but the kind of presents that showed she really knew me. Last year, it was vintage vinyl records, stuff I'd mentioned wanting but never got around to buying myself. "Of course I did," she said, setting the box down in front of me with this little flourish, like she was presenting the crown jewels. 40's a big deal. My husband deserves something memorable. I reached for it, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the way she was watching me, like she was waiting for something specific to happen. Or maybe it was just that weird feeling you get sometimes, like when you're walking down the street, and suddenly you know someone's watching you from a window. But I shook it off. Hell, it was my birthday, my wife was being sweet, and I was being paranoid for no good reason. "Thanks, honey," I said, meaning it. "I love you." "I love you too," she replied. But something about the way she said it felt off. Like she was reading lines from a script she'd memorized but didn't really understand. I was just about to untie that silver ribbon when my phone started buzzing on the counter. The ringtone was Julian's, that annoying hip-hop beat he'd programmed in as a joke years ago, and I'd never bothered to change. My little brother, 2 years younger but sometimes acted like he was the older one, always looking out for me even when I didn't need it. "Let it go to voicemail," Miranda said quickly. Too quickly, but I was already reaching for the phone. "Nah, it's Julian. Probably calling to bust my balls about being over the hill." I swiped to answer. "What's up, little brother?" Ready to make fun of the old man. But Julian's voice hit me like a slap in the face. He sounded winded, like he'd been running, and there was this edge to his words that made my stomach clench up. "Tyler, listen to me very carefully. Don't open the gift. Just don't." I felt Miranda's eyes on me, boring into the side of my head like lasers. "What? Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual even though my heart had just kicked into overdrive. "Just trust me on this, okay? Can't you see it?" "See what?" I looked down at the box again, really looked at it this time instead of just admiring the pretty wrapping. And that's when my world tilted sideways. There, along the side of the black box, were these tiny little holes. Perfect circles, maybe the size of a pencil tip, punched through the cardboard in a neat row. Breathing holes. My hand started shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. The coffee mug slipped from my other hand and hit the table with a clink that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Miranda was still standing there, still watching me with those eyes that used to look at me with love, but now seemed cold as winter. "Tyler." Julian's voice was tinny through the phone speaker. "You there, man?" I stared at those holes, my mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. What kind of birthday present needed air holes? What kind of wife gives her husband something that needs to breathe? And why the hell did Julian know about it when I didn't? The box sat there on the table between Miranda and me like a ticking bomb. I could swear I saw it move slightly, just a tiny shift that could have been my imagination, but probably wasn't. Whatever was inside that pretty black package with the silver ribbon wasn't a watch or a book or anything normal. It was alive, and my wife had handed it to me with a smile. Julian's voice crackled through the phone like he was calling from another planet, but every word hit me like a punch to the gut. Tyler, I overheard something last night. Something that made my blood run cold. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, trying to block out the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my head. What are you talking about, man? Overheard what? I was at Murphy's Tavern. You know, that dive bar on 5th Street where the music's too loud and the beer's too cheap. I was shooting pool with some guys from work when I heard this voice I recognized. It was Miranda, Tyler. She was in one of those back booths, the dark ones where people go when they don't want to be seen. My mouth went dry as dust. Miranda had told me she was having dinner with her sister Sarah last night. Girls' night out, she'd said, probably going to hit up that fancy Italian place downtown and complain about their husbands over expensive wine. But Murphy's Tavern? That wasn't Miranda's scene at all. Hell, I wasn't even sure she knew the place existed. Are you sure it was her? I asked, even though I knew Julian wouldn't call me unless he was absolutely certain. My brother might be a lot of things, but he wasn't the type to stir up drama over nothing. Dead sure. I'd recognize that laugh anywhere. You know, that little giggle she does when she thinks she's being clever. So I moved closer, pretended I was looking for the bathroom, and that's when I caught part of their conversation. The black box on the table seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. I couldn't take my eyes off those tiny holes, wondering what the hell was breathing inside there. Part of what conversation? With who? Julian's voice dropped to almost a whisper, like he was afraid someone might be listening. I couldn't see who she was talking to, some guy sitting across from her, but his back was to me. All I caught was the tail end of what she was saying. But Tyler, it was enough to make me want to throw up right there on the barroom floor. Just tell me what you heard, Julian. Stop dancing around it. She said, let him open it alone. He deserves it. And then she laughed, man. Not her regular laugh, but this cold, mean sound that didn't even sound human. The guy asked her something I couldn't catch, and she said, trust me, this will be perfect. He'll never see it coming. The room started spinning around me like I was drunk, but I hadn't touched anything stronger than coffee. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. She was talking about me. About this. I gestured at the box even though Julian couldn't see me. Has to be. What else could it be? Tyler, whatever's in that box, it isn't good. The way she was talking, the way she was planning it out like some kind of sick joke. This isn't the Miranda we know. This is someone else wearing her face. I could hear Miranda in the kitchen, humming some tune I didn't recognize. It should have been comforting, that domestic sound of my wife making breakfast on my birthday morning. Instead, it made my skin crawl. Every note sounded fake now, like she was putting on a performance for my benefit. What do I do? I asked Julian, hating how lost I sounded. 40 years old, and I was asking my little brother for advice like I was 12 again. Don't open it. Whatever you do, don't open that thing. And Tyler, get away from her. Like, right now. Come to my place, we'll figure this out together. I stood up from the table, my legs shaky as a newborn colt's. The box was still sitting there, innocent looking except for those damning little holes. As I stared at it, I swear I saw it shift again. Just a tiny movement, but enough to make my stomach lurch. I can't just leave, I whispered. This is my house, my life. 10 years of marriage, Julian. 10 years. And how many of those years was she planning something like this? How long has she been lying to your face while plotting God knows what? That hit me like a sledgehammer. Because now that I thought about it, things had been weird lately. Little things I'd brushed off as stress from her job, or just the normal ups and downs of married life. The way she'd been on her phone more, always angling the screen away from me. The new passwords on everything. The sudden interest in going out alone, claiming she needed space to think. The humming stopped. Dead silence from the kitchen, like she was listening for something. Or someone. Tyler. Julian's voice seemed to come from very far away. You still there, brother? I looked at that box one more time, at those perfect little breathing holes that meant something alive was trapped inside. Something my wife had wrapped up in pretty paper and handed to me with a smile. Yeah, I said quietly. I'm here, and I'm starting to understand that I've been living with a stranger. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial 911. 3 simple numbers that I'd never had to use in my 40 years of life, and now here I was, punching them into my phone while staring at a birthday present that might be trying to kill me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Most people's midlife crisis involved buying a motorcycle or getting a tattoo, not calling the cops on their wife's gift. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional, like she dealt with this kind of insanity every day. I received a suspicious package. I stammered, feeling like a complete idiot. There's something alive inside it, and I think someone's trying to hurt me. Sir, are you in immediate danger? I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where Miranda and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd planned our future over coffee and bagels on Sunday mornings. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. I don't know. Maybe. The package has breathing holes in it. We're sending units to your location. Please stay on the line and move away from the package. I backed away from the table like that black box might explode at any second. Through the archway, I could see Miranda in the living room, dusting the mantel with this weird intensity, like she was trying to polish away evidence of something. Every few seconds, she'd glance toward the kitchen, and each time our eyes met, she'd flash me this bright, fake smile that made my stomach turn. The cops showed up faster than I expected, maybe 8 minutes, though it felt like hours. 2 patrol cars pulled into my driveway with their lights flashing, but no sirens, probably trying to keep the whole neighborhood from rubbernecking at my domestic disaster. Officer Dean Malley stepped out of the first car, this big guy with salt and pepper hair and the kind of mustache that belonged in an 80s cop movie. His partner was Officer Rosa Kim, smaller, but with these sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. You the one who called about the suspicious package? Malley asked, all business. Yeah, that's me. Tyler Morrison. It's in the kitchen. I led them inside, grateful to have someone else deal with this nightmare. My wife gave it to me for my birthday this morning, but my brother warned me not to open it. Kim pulled on latex gloves and approached the box like she was defusing a bomb. Has anyone handled this besides your wife? Just her, as far as I know. She wrapped it herself, I'm pretty sure. Malley was examining the silver ribbon, careful not to disturb anything. These holes here, definitely intentional. Whatever's inside needs air. He looked up at me with eyes that had probably seen every kind of human ugliness imaginable. You have any idea what your wife might have put in here? Before I could answer, Miranda appeared in the kitchen doorway like she'd been summoned by some invisible signal. She was wearing this expression of perfect confusion, eyebrows raised, mouth slightly open in what was supposed to look like innocent surprise. If I hadn't known better, I might have bought the act. What's going on? She asked, her voice hitting just the right note of concerned bewilderment. Officers, is there some kind of problem? Ma'am, we're investigating a suspicious package, Kim said without looking away from the box. Did you give this to your husband this morning? Well, yes, it's his birthday present. I don't understand why that would be suspicious. Miranda moved closer, and I instinctively stepped back. Amazing how someone you'd shared a bed with for 10 years could suddenly feel like a complete stranger, maybe even a dangerous one. Don't, I said, the word coming out harsher than I intended. Just don't. The look she gave me could have frozen hell over. For just a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating behind her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by hurt confusion that would have won her an Oscar if this were a movie instead of my life falling apart. Tyler, honey, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Malley called for animal control while Kim continued her examination. This looks like a smuggling case, he said, pulling out his radio. Likely a reptile of some kind, based on the container size and ventilation. A reptile. My wife had put a goddamn snake or lizard or God knows what in a birthday box and handed it to me with a smile. The woman I'd promised to love and honor had tried to what? Scare me to death? Give me a heart attack? Or was this just the appetizer for something worse? Miranda didn't argue when I told her to get out of the kitchen. She just disappeared down the hallway toward our bedroom, and I could hear her footsteps on the hardwood, quick and light, like she was running from something. Or planning something. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours, but finally animal control showed up. This weathered guy in khakis who looked like he wrestled alligators for fun. The cop stepped back as he approached the box with professional calm. Let's see what we've got here, he muttered, carefully cutting the ribbon. The animal control guy worked with the kind of steady hands you only get from years of dealing with creatures that could bite, scratch, or poison you without warning. His name tag read Martinez, and he had this calm energy that made me feel slightly less like the world was ending. Slightly. Easy does it, he murmured, more to himself than to us, as he carefully lifted the lid of the black box. The silver ribbon fell away like discarded lies, and for a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Martinez let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Officer Kim stepped closer, her hand instinctively moving toward her radio. What view we got? King Snake, Martinez said, his voice carrying a mixture of professional interest and human disgust. Lamprepeltis getula, probably about 3 feet long, coiled up in here like a spring waiting to pop. He looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much stupid human behavior. Non-venomous, but that doesn't make this any less screwed up. I felt my knees go weak. A snake. My wife had put a live snake in a birthday box and handed it to me like it was a goddamn Rolex. The reality of it hit me like a freight train. If I'd opened that box without Julian's warning, that thing would have shot out at me like a bullet. Maybe it wouldn't have killed me, but the shock alone could have stopped my heart. At 40, with my family history of heart problems, it might have been game over. Jesus Christ, I whispered, running my hands through my hair. She actually did it. She actually put a snake in there. Martinez was already preparing a proper container, talking to the snake in that gentle voice animal people use. Hey there, buddy. Let's get you out of this cramped little prison and somewhere more appropriate. The snake seemed almost grateful as it slithered into the larger carrier, its scales catching the kitchen light like black diamonds. Officer Malley was taking notes, his pen scratching across the pad with the efficiency of a man who'd filled out 1,000 reports. Mr. Morrison, do you have any idea who might have sent this to you? The question hung in the air like smoke. I could feel all their eyes on me. Malley, Kim, Martinez, even the damn snake seemed to be waiting for my answer. The truth was right there on the tip of my tongue, but something held me back. Maybe it was 10 years of marriage talking, or maybe it was just the pathetic hope that there was some other explanation, some way this wasn't what it looked like. No, I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. No idea, but even as the words left my lips, I knew they could all see through me. Kim especially was giving me that look cops get when they know you're holding back, that patient stare that says they'll wait all day for you to tell them what they already suspect. The truth was written all over my face like graffiti on a wall. I might as well have had "My wife tried to kill me" tattooed on my forehead. The way my hands were shaking, the way I kept glancing toward the hallway where Miranda had disappeared, the way I couldn't quite meet anyone's eyes. It all screamed guilty knowledge. Are you sure about that? Kim asked gently. Because whoever did this knew your address, knew it was your birthday, knew enough about you to make this personal. This isn't random, Mr. Morrison. This is targeted. I thought about Miranda's behavior over the past few weeks. The secretive phone calls that stopped the moment I walked into a room. The way she'd been staying up late on her laptop, always closing it when I came to bed. The sudden interest in my schedule, asking about my meetings, my plans, like she was mapping out my life for some purpose I couldn't understand. And then there was what Julian had overheard at Murphy's Tavern. Let him open it alone. He deserves it. The words echoed in my head like a death sentence. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, had sat in a bar with some stranger and planned this moment. She'd chosen the snake, bought the box, wrapped it with that pretty silver ribbon, and handed it to me with a smile. The thing is, Martinez said, securing the snake carrier, king snakes aren't easy to get. You can't just walk into PetSmart and buy one. Someone had to know what they were doing, had to plan this out. He looked at me with something like pity. Today to give a full statement. And Mr. Morrison, if you think of anything else, anything at all that might help us figure out who did this, you call us immediately. After they left, taking the snake with them, I stood alone in my kitchen. The black box sat empty on the table, a hollow reminder of how close I'd come to disaster. The silver ribbon lay scattered on the floor like the remains of my marriage, pretty on the surface, but hiding something deadly underneath. I could hear Miranda moving around upstairs, her footsteps careful and measured. Planning her next move, probably. Or maybe just waiting to see how much I knew, how much I'd figured out. The animal control guy's name was Pete Kowalski, and he had hands like leather gloves from years of handling creatures that could bite, scratch, or worse. He approached my birthday present like he was opening a bottle of beer, casual, professional, like finding live animals in gift boxes was just another Tuesday for him. All right, let's see what we're dealing with, Pete said, carefully lifting the lid of the black box. The silver ribbon fell away like it was surrendering, and I held my breath, half expecting something to come flying out like a jack-in-the-box from hell. What I saw instead made my knees go weak. Coiled inside a clear plastic container that barely gave it room to move was a snake. Not some tiny garden snake or harmless garter snake, but a decent-sized serpent with bands of black, red, and white running down its body like racing stripes. It was beautiful in that terrifying way that dangerous things sometimes are, and it was very much alive. King snake, Pete announced, like he was identifying a species of bird at the park. Lamprepeltis getula, non-venomous, but they can give you a nasty bite if they're pissed off, which this little guy definitely is. He gestured to the snake, which was moving restlessly in its cramped prison, tongue flicking out to taste the air it had been denied for God knows how long. Officer Kim leaned in for a closer look. How long has it been in there? Hard to say exactly, but based on its behavior and the condensation in the container, I'd guess at least 12 hours, maybe more. Long enough to be stressed, dehydrated, and really unhappy about the whole situation. 12 hours. That meant Miranda had packaged this thing up yesterday. Maybe while I was at work, maybe while I was in the shower, maybe while I was sitting right next to her on the couch watching TV and thinking everything was normal. The thought made my stomach churn like I'd swallowed battery acid. Is it dangerous? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. King snakes aren't venomous, but they're constrictors, Pete explained, carefully lifting the container out of the box. This one's about 3 feet long, so it could definitely hurt you if it got wrapped around your arm or neck. Plus, they're known for being aggressive when they feel threatened, which this one certainly would have after being trapped in a box. Officer Malley was taking notes, his pen scratching against the paper like fingernails on a chalkboard. So if someone opened this box without knowing what was inside, they'd probably drop it, maybe get bitten, definitely get the scare of their life, Pete finished. King snakes are fast movers when they want to be. This thing would have been out of that container and slithering around the room before you could blink. I imagined it, sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, untying that pretty silver ribbon, lifting the lid, and having 3 feet of angry snake come shooting out at my face. My hands started shaking again, and I had to grab the counter to keep from falling over. Officer Kim was studying me with those sharp eyes of hers. Mr. Morrison, do you have any idea who might have sent this to you? The lie came out automatically, like a reflex I couldn't control. No, but even as I said it, I knew my face was giving me away. I'd never been good at poker, and I sure as hell wasn't good at lying to cops who probably dealt with liars every day of the week. The truth was written all over my expression, and Kim saw it immediately. She exchanged a look with Malley that said they both knew I was holding back. But they didn't push, not yet. Maybe they figured I'd come clean when I was ready, or maybe they were just giving me rope to hang myself with. We'll need to take this as evidence, Malley said, nodding toward the snake. And we'll need a full statement from you and your wife. My wife. The woman who was probably in our bedroom right now, trying to figure out how to spin this disaster into something innocent. The woman who had looked me in the eye this morning and wished me happy birthday while handing me a box full of reptilian revenge. Pete was securing the snake in a proper carrier now, talking to it in the kind of soothing voice you'd use with a scared child. Easy there, buddy. We're going to get you somewhere safe, get you some water and space to stretch out. I found myself feeling sorry for the snake. At least it was just an innocent animal caught up in whatever sick game Miranda was playing. It didn't deserve to be stuffed in a box and used as a weapon in someone else's marital warfare. Mr. Morrison? Officer Kim's voice brought me back to reality. We're going to need to speak with your wife now. I nodded, not trusting my voice to work properly. The snake was gone, secured in Pete's van, but the damage was done. The truth was sitting in my kitchen like a ticking bomb, and I knew that once we started talking to Miranda, there'd be no going back. My 40th birthday had officially become the day my marriage died. The cops left around noon, taking their questions and suspicious looks with them. Miranda had played the concerned wife act to perfection, all wide eyes and trembling hands, claiming she had no idea how a snake could have ended up in what she insisted was supposed to be a watch. I bought it from a jewelry store downtown, she'd said, tears actually forming in her eyes. Someone must have switched the boxes. This is horrible, just horrible. I'd watched her performance from the kitchen doorway, amazed at how convincing she sounded. If I didn't know better, if Julian hadn't called me with that warning, I might have bought it myself. Hell, even Officer Kim seemed to soften a little when Miranda started crying about how someone had violated our home, our trust, our special day. But I knew better now. And once the patrol cars pulled out of our driveway and the neighbors stopped peeking through their curtains, I had work to do. Miranda announced she was going to take a bath, that the stress of the morning had given her a migraine. Perfect. That would give me at least an hour to dig through our digital life and find the proof I needed. Because Julian's overheard conversation wasn't enough, not for the cops, and definitely not for a divorce lawyer. Our shared tablet was sitting on the coffee table where it always was, plugged into the charger and looking innocent as hell. We'd gotten it 2 Christmases ago, one of those practical gifts that couples buy when they've run out of romantic ideas. Miranda used it for her social media, online shopping, and those stupid cooking videos she was always watching. I used it mainly for checking sports scores and reading the news. What I'd never done was go through her private messages. I knew the password. It was our wedding anniversary, because Miranda wasn't creative with that kind of stuff. My fingers felt clumsy as I typed in the numbers, like I was breaking into someone else's house instead of accessing something that technically belonged to both of us. Her message apps were right there on the home screen. Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram DMs, she had accounts on everything. But it was the text messages that made my blood run cold. There, right at the top of her recent conversations, was a contact labeled Simply K. My hand started shaking as I opened the thread. At first, the messages seemed innocent enough. Generic stuff about meeting up, asking about work, the kind of casual conversation you might have with any friend. But as I scrolled down to messages from the past few weeks, the tone changed completely. 3 weeks ago, he's been so distant lately. I don't think he even notices me anymore. 2 weeks ago, I'm tired of pretending everything's fine. 10 years of this shit. And for what? And then, from just 5 days ago, the messages that made me want to throw the tablet against the wall. Miranda, I've been thinking about what you said. About making him pay for taking me for granted. K, you sure about this? There's no going back once you start down that road. Miranda, I'm sure. He deserves to know what it feels like to be scared, to feel helpless. Just once. K, what did you have in mind? Miranda, something that'll shake him up. I just want to see him panic for once. I want to see that smug, comfortable expression wiped off his face. K, then what? Miranda, then I move on. With you. I screenshot everything, my thumbs moving automatically while my brain tried to process what I was reading. 10 years of marriage, and she thought I was smug? Comfortable? Taking her for granted? When the hell had I ever made her feel like that? But the worst part, the part that made me want to punch a hole through the drywall, was the identity of K. Because I'd been wondering who this mystery person was, and Miranda had been sloppy about covering her tracks. Buried in the message thread, from about a month ago, was a photo. Just a quick snapshot of 2 coffee cups on a table, the kind of casual pic people share without thinking twice. But I recognized that table. I recognized those hands holding one of the cups. And when I zoomed in on the contact photo for K, I saw a face I knew as well as my own. Kellen Rodriguez. My old college buddy. The guy who'd been best man at our wedding. The friend who came over for barbecues and birthday parties. Who'd sat at our dinner table and eaten Miranda's cooking while telling jokes and acting like he was family. Kellen, who apparently had been screwing my wife and helping her plan my psychological torture. I sat there in our living room, surrounded by 10 years of shared memories, photos on the mantle, furniture we'd picked out together, books we'd both read, and felt like I was seeing it all for the first time. Had she been lying to me for months? Years? How long had Kellen been coming to our house, shaking my hand and slapping my back, while secretly planning to steal my life? The sound of water draining from the bathtub upstairs snapped me back to reality. Miranda would be down soon, probably expecting me to act normal, to pretend everything was fine while she figured out her next move. But I wasn't going to give her that chance. Not anymore. Julian's voice echoed in my head. She said you deserved it. Well, maybe I did deserve something. But it sure as hell wasn't a snake in a box from a cheating wife and a backstabbing friend. It was the truth. And now I had it. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, Every family photo on the mantle looking like evidence of a lie I'd been living for who knows how long. I grabbed my keys and wallet, shouted up to Miranda that I was going out for a drive, and peeled out of the driveway like the place was on fire. Maybe it was. Julian lived about 15 minutes across town in one of those new apartment complexes that tried too hard to look fancy, but still smelled like fresh paint and broken dreams. I called him from the parking lot, and he was waiting for me at his front door before I even made it to the elevator. "You look like hell, brother," he said, which was probably true. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, then backed over for good measure. "You were right," I said, collapsing onto his couch like my legs had given out. "About everything. It's worse than we thought." Julian disappeared into his kitchen and came back with 2 beers, the good stuff he kept for emergencies. This definitely qualified. "Tell me." So I did. I showed him the screenshots on my phone, watching his face get darker with each message. When I got to the part about Kellen, Julian actually stood up and started pacing around his living room like a caged animal. "That son of a bitch," he muttered. "That goddamn son of a bitch." I never liked him, Tyler. Even back in college, there was something slimy about him. Always trying to get with other guys' girlfriends. Always stirring up drama. He was my best man, Julian. He stood up at our wedding and made a speech about how lucky I was, how Miranda and I were perfect for each other. And the whole time, he was probably planning this. Not planning, waiting. Guys like Kellen, they're vultures. They circle around happy couples, looking for cracks they can exploit. And when Miranda started feeling neglected or whatever her excuse is, he was right there to take advantage. I took a long pull from my beer, trying to wash the taste of betrayal out of my mouth. It didn't work. She wanted to break me mentally. That's what you said, right? She wanted to see me panic. And then what? She comforts you after your traumatic experience, plays the supportive wife for a few more months while she gets her ducks in a row, then files for divorce and takes half your shit. Julian shook his head. "This isn't just cheating, Tyler. This is calculated, premeditated emotional abuse." The worst part was, I could see it playing out exactly like Julian described. Miranda rushing to my side after I opened that box, holding me while I shook, telling me everything would be okay, while secretly laughing at how easily she'd broken me. Then, maybe a few months down the road, she'd sit me down for one of those "we need to talk" conversations and explain how we'd grown apart, how she needed space to find herself. And I would have believed her. Hell, I probably would have blamed myself for not being a better husband. "We need more proof," I said. "Text messages are good, but if she's been planning this for weeks or months, there's got to be more." Julian snapped his fingers. "The security cameras. You installed those after the garage break-in last year, right?" I had. 2 cameras covering the front and back of the house, connected to a DVR system in the basement. I'd set them up more for insurance reasons than anything else, but they recorded everything 24/7 and stored it for about 3 months before cycling over. You think she brought the snake to the house herself? I think Miranda's been lying about a lot of things lately. And if she did get that snake, if she wrapped it up herself, those cameras would have caught it. We drove back to my house in Julian's car, parking down the street like a couple of private detectives in a bad movie. Miranda's car was gone, probably off somewhere with Kellen, planning their next move or celebrating how clever they thought they were. The basement was dusty and cramped, filled with boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture we couldn't bring ourselves to throw away. The DVR system was tucked into a corner, humming quietly like it had been waiting for this moment. "What are we looking for?" Julian asked, pulling up a folding chair next to me. "Yesterday. If she got that snake yesterday like the animal control guy thought, it would show up on the recordings." I scrolled through the footage, fast-forwarding through hours of empty driveway and backyard until something caught my eye. There, yesterday afternoon at 2:17 p.m., while I was still at work, a delivery truck pulled into our driveway. Not UPS or FedEx, but one of those unmarked white vans that specialized deliveries used. The driver got out with a package, rang the doorbell, and Miranda answered. But here's the thing that made my blood boil. She wasn't surprised. She didn't have that confused look people get when they receive an unexpected package. She was expecting it. She signed for it with a smile, chatted with the driver for a minute like they were old friends, then carried the box inside like she was handling something precious. "Son of a bitch," Julian breathed. She ordered it herself. I kept scrolling through the footage. 3 hours later, At 5:43 p.m., Miranda came out to the garage with that same box, plus wrapping paper, ribbon, and scissors. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but we could see her working at the garage workbench, carefully wrapping the package that would nearly give me a heart attack the next morning. "This isn't a prank," Julian said, and his voice was stone cold. "This is malice. Pure, calculated malice." I sat back in that dusty basement chair, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The Tyler who had woken up that morning expecting a normal birthday was gone, replaced by someone harder, angrier, and a hell of a lot less trusting. "She wanted to see me panic," I said quietly. "She wanted to break me down, make me feel helpless and scared. And then what were you supposed to do? Run to her for comfort? Cling to her like she was your savior?" I nodded. It was exactly what would have happened if Julian hadn't called, if he hadn't overheard that conversation at Murphy's Tavern. I would have opened that box, freaked out, and spent the next few months being grateful that my loving wife was there to help me through the trauma that she had caused. "She picked the wrong guy to mess with," I said, ejecting the memory card from the DVR. "And she definitely picked the wrong birthday to do it on." Julian clapped me on the shoulder. "So what's the plan, brother?" I looked at the evidence in my hands, screenshots, video footage, and a growing certainty that my 10-year marriage had been built on lies and manipulation. Miranda thought she was so clever, so careful in her planning. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Monday morning hit me like a freight train, but for the first time in 48 hours, I knew exactly what I had to do. I'd spent Sunday night in Julian's spare bedroom, staring at the ceiling and making lists in my head. Lists of assets, accounts, passwords, and all the ways Miranda had access to my life. It was amazing how much financial power you handed over to someone when you trusted them completely. Well, that trust was officially dead and buried. My first stop was Danielle Brooks' law office downtown. Danielle had handled the paperwork when we bought the house, and she'd drawn up our wills a few years back when Miranda got paranoid about plane crashes. She was sharp as a tack, tougher than a $2 steak, and the kind of lawyer who smiled when other people brought her their worst problems. "Tyler Morrison," she said when her secretary showed me into her office. "What brings you here so early on a Monday? You look like you haven't slept in a week." "I need to freeze everything, Danielle. Bank accounts, credit cards, investments, every financial connection I have with my wife. And I need it done today." Danielle's eyebrows shot up, but she didn't ask stupid questions. That's why I liked her. She grabbed a legal pad and started scribbling notes while I laid out the whole sick story, the snake, the messages, Kellen, the security footage, everything. By the time I finished, she was shaking her head like she'd seen it all before. "Emotional abuse with intent to cause psychological harm," she said, tapping her pen against the pad. Sharp lawyer eyes. "How much does she have access to?" "Everything. Joint checking, joint savings, credit cards in both names. She's got her own cards tied to my accounts, and she handles most of the bills online." Saying it out loud made me feel like the world's biggest idiot. 10 years of marriage, and I'd basically handed her the keys to my entire financial life. "Not anymore," Danielle said grimly. "I'm calling the bank right now. We'll freeze the joint accounts, remove her access from everything, and set up new accounts in your name only. The credit cards get canceled and reissued. Your direct deposit gets redirected. By the end of today, she won't be able to buy a cup of coffee with your money." It took most of the morning, but Danielle was a woman on a mission. She had contacts at every major bank in town, and she used them all. Phone call after phone call, form after form, signature after signature. My hand was cramping by the time we finished, but it was worth it. "What about the house?" I asked. "Still in your name only, right? You bought it before you got married." "Yeah, with money from my dad's life insurance. Miranda's name isn't on the deed." "Good. That makes things easier. We'll change the locks today, and if she tries to cause trouble, we'll get a restraining order." Danielle leaned back in her chair, looking satisfied. "What about your will?" "That one hurt. She's the primary beneficiary. Everything goes to her if I die." "Not anymore. We'll draw up a new will this afternoon. Your brother Julian seems like a good choice for executor, and you can decide how you want your assets distributed. But Miranda gets nothing. Not a damn penny." By the time I left Danielle's office, it was past noon, and I felt like I'd been through a financial colonoscopy. But it was done. Every account frozen, every access point cut off. every legal document amended. Miranda had probably spent the morning thinking she was so clever, so in control of the situation. She was about to get a very rude awakening. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown to give myself time to think. The house looked the same from the outside. Same white shutters, same red door, same flower beds that Miranda fussed over every spring. But it felt different now, like I was returning to a crime scene instead of coming home. Miranda's car was in the driveway. Perfect. I found her in the living room, sitting on our couch with her laptop open, probably chatting with Kellen about how traumatized I'd been by my mysterious birthday surprise. She looked up when I walked in, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Fear? Or maybe just annoyance that I'd interrupted her afternoon plans. "Hey, honey," she said, closing the laptop a little too quickly. "How was your day?" "Productive," I said, sitting down in the armchair across from her. The same chair where I'd opened Christmas presents and watched Super Bowl games and fallen asleep reading books. Now it felt like a witness stand. "That's good. I was thinking maybe we could go out for dinner tonight. Try that new Italian place downtown. After everything that happened yesterday, I thought it might be nice to have a normal evening together." Normal. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. There was nothing normal about a woman who put snakes in birthday boxes. Nothing normal about planning psychological warfare against your own husband. "About yesterday," I said carefully. "I've been thinking about what happened, and I realized something." "What's that?" Her voice was steady, but I could see her fingers tightening on the laptop. "You put a snake in that box, Miranda. You ordered it. You wrapped it. And you smiled when you handed it to me." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Miranda's face went through about 6 different expressions in the space of 10 seconds. Surprise, confusion, hurt, anger, and finally something that looked almost like relief. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her heart wasn't in it. "Why would I do something like that?" "Because you wanted to see me panic. Because you're sleeping with Kellen Rodriguez and you wanted to torture me before you left me for him." Now the mask came off completely. Her face hardened into something I'd never seen before, something cold and calculating that made my skin crawl. This was the real Miranda, the one who'd been hiding behind 10 years of fake smiles and loving gestures. "You've been going through my phone," she said. It wasn't a question. "Our tablet. The one we both pay for with our joint account. Which, by the way, doesn't exist anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean I froze everything today. Bank accounts, credit cards, investments. Your little shopping trips with Kellen are going to have to be on his dime from now on." Miranda stood up so fast the laptop slid off her knees and hit the floor. "You can't do that. That's my money too." "Actually, it's not. Most of it came from my salary, my inheritance, my investments. You contributed what? Maybe 20% over the years. And now you've forfeited even that by committing adultery and trying to drive me insane." She was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Tyler, you're being crazy. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. The only place we're going is divorce court. I've already talked to my lawyer." That's when she snapped. Her face went red, her hands clenched into fists, and suddenly I was looking at a woman I didn't recognize at all. "You'll regret this," she snarled. "Kellen and I." "Don't." I cut her off, standing up to face her. "Just don't. You tried to break me, Miranda. You try to make me feel helpless and scared and dependent on you. But here's the thing. I'm not the man you thought I was. And you're not the woman I married. You're not the man I married either," she shot back. "You're not the same person who used to surprise me with flowers and take me dancing and make me feel special. You became this boring, predictable, comfortable man who takes everything for granted. And that gave you the right to torture me? To cheat on me with my best friend. I never meant for it to go this far. It was supposed to be a harmless prank, just something to shake you up a little, make you appreciate what you had. Bullshit. You wanted to see me broken. You wanted to humiliate me, and then you were going to leave me anyway. The only difference is, now I know about it." Miranda grabbed her purse and headed for the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood like gunshots. "This isn't over, Tyler. You can't just cut me off and throw me out like garbage." "Watch me," I said quietly. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob, and for a moment I thought she might apologize, might show some sign of the woman I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. Instead, she looked back at me with pure hatred. "You were always a selfish bastard," she said. "I should have left you years ago." "Yeah," I agreed. "You should have. The door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood there in my living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, and felt something I hadn't expected: relief. I didn't sleep worth a damn that night. Every creak of the house settling, every car doors slamming in the neighborhood, every random noise had me wondering if Miranda was coming back with reinforcements. Maybe Kellen, maybe a lawyer, maybe a baseball bat. At this point, nothing would have surprised me. But morning came peaceful enough, gray and drizzly like the weather was mourning the death of my marriage. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen, sat at the same table where this whole nightmare had started just 2 days ago, and tried to figure out what normal was supposed to look like now. I didn't have to wait long to find out. Around 8:30, I heard Miranda's car pulling into the driveway way too fast, tires squealing against wet pavement like she was arriving at a crime scene. Through the kitchen window, I watched her get out and slam the door hard enough to dent the frame. She was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Her hair was a mess, and she had that wild look in her eyes that said she'd spent the night plotting revenge instead of sleeping. She didn't bother knocking, just marched up to the front door and started banging on it like the house was on fire. Tyler, open this damn door right now." I took my time finishing my coffee, partly because I wasn't in any hurry to deal with her drama, and partly because I wanted her to stew out there for a few minutes. Let her get good and worked up. Sometimes the best strategy is to let your enemy defeat themselves. When I finally opened the door, she pushed past me like she owned the place. Which, technically, she didn't, something I was pretty sure she was about to find out the hard way. "Where's the money?" she demanded, whirling around to face me in the entryway. "My card got declined at the grocery store this morning. The cashier had to cut it up in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I told you yesterday. I removed your access to everything. You can't do that. We're married. That's community property." I almost laughed. Community property? You mean the money I earned while you were screwing around with my best friend and planning to traumatize me with reptiles? That community property. Her face went red as a fire truck. "I have rights, Tyler. Legal rights. You can't just freeze me out of our accounts because you're having some kind of midlife crisis." Midlife crisis? Now I did laugh, a short, bitter sound that echoed off the walls. "Lady, you put a snake in a birthday box and handed it to me with a smile. If anyone's having a crisis here, it's you. It was a harmless prank." "Bullshit. You wanted to see me panic, remember? You wanted to break me down so you could play the supportive wife while you planned your exit strategy with Kellen." At the mention of his name, something shifted in her expression. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Guilt? Fear? Or maybe just the realization that she'd been caught red-handed. "Kellen and I," she started. "Don't." I cut her off, stepping closer. "Don't you dare try to explain that away. I saw the messages, Miranda. All of them. The planning, the plotting, the let him open it alone. He deserves it bullshit. You and your boyfriend tried to drive me insane, and now you're mad because it backfired." She took a step back, probably realizing for the first time that the Tyler she'd been married to, the comfortable, predictable guy who took everything lying down, wasn't standing in front of her anymore. "We never meant for it to go this far," she said, but her voice was weaker now, less certain. "Yes, you did. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You wanted me broken and scared and dependent on you, and then you were going to leave me anyway. The only thing you didn't count on was me finding out before you could finish the job. You're wrong. I love you, Tyler. I've always loved you." The lie hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I stared at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for 10 years, this person I'd trusted with my heart and my future and my bank account, and felt nothing but pity. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have cheated. If you loved me, you wouldn't have put a snake in a box and watched me open it. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent weeks planning my psychological destruction with another man." "Tyler, please." "No." The word came out harder than I intended, echoing through the house like a gunshot. "You made your choice when you decided to torture me instead of talking to me. You made your choice when you started screwing Kellen behind my back. And I'm making mine now." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken of their text messages. Her face went white as she realized how much evidence I had. "I already filed a police report about the snake," I said. "Turns out, using animals to threaten or intimidate someone is a crime in this state. Who knew? And I filed for a protection order and an emergency divorce." My lawyer says adultery and emotional abuse are grounds for an at-fault divorce, which means you get a lot less of my stuff. You filed a police report? Her voice was barely a whisper. Yesterday afternoon. Officer Kim was very interested in the security footage of you receiving and wrapping that package. Amazing how technology can turn a harmless prank into premeditated assault. Miranda sank down onto the couch like her legs had given out. For a moment, she looked small and lost, and almost like the woman I'd married. Almost. What about us? She asked. What about 10 years of marriage? What about them? You threw those years away the minute you decided I was the enemy instead of your husband. You turned our home into a battlefield, our marriage into a lie, and my birthday into a weapon. I'm sorry, she said, and for the first time since this whole mess started, she sounded like she meant it. I'm so sorry, Tyler. I never wanted it to end like this. Then you should have thought about that before you chose Kellen over me. You should have thought about that before you tried to drive me crazy for fun. I walked to the front door and held it open. Get out, Miranda. Get your stuff and get out of my house. This is my home too. Not anymore. The house is in my name only, bought with my inheritance before we got married. My lawyer checked. You have no legal claim to it. She stood up slowly, her face cycling through anger, disbelief, and something that might have been regret. You'll regret this, Tyler. When you're sitting here alone in this big, empty house, you'll regret throwing away our marriage over a stupid mistake. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were 10 years ago. Would have saved us both a lot of trouble. She walked to the door, pausing just before she stepped outside. Kellen loves me. He understands me in ways you never did. Then I hope you'll be very happy together. Just do it somewhere else. Miranda looked back at me one last time, and I could see her trying to think of something cutting to say, some final insult that would hurt me the way she thought I was hurting her. Instead, she just shook her head and walked out into the drizzling morning. I watched her drive away, probably heading straight to Kellen's place to cry on his shoulder and plan their next move. Let them plan. I had a locksmith to call and a life to rebuild. And for the first time in 48 hours, I felt like I could breathe again. The courthouse smelled like old wood polish and broken dreams. I'd been there twice before, once to get married, once to handle my dad's estate after he passed. Now I was back for the hat trick, sitting in a sterile waiting room with fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead, waiting for a judge to officially end the biggest mistake of my life. Danielle sat beside me, shuffling through a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. She'd been working around the clock for the past week, building what she called an airtight case against Miranda. The woman was ruthless when she got her teeth into something, and right now those teeth were firmly planted in my wife's legal throat. Remember, Danielle said quietly, let me do the talking unless the judge asks you a direct question. Miranda's lawyer is going to try to paint you as the controlling husband who overreacted to a harmless joke. Don't take the bait. I nodded, though honestly I wasn't worried about keeping my cool. The rage had burned itself out over the past week, leaving behind something colder and more focused. Miranda had tried to break me down, and instead she'd built me back up into someone stronger. Someone who wouldn't be manipulated or gaslit or made to feel crazy for demanding basic human decency from his wife. The courtroom doors opened, and there she was. Miranda walked in with her lawyer, some slick-looking guy in a $1,000 suit who probably specialized in making cheating wives look like victims. She'd cleaned up nice for the occasion. Conservative dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in what I'm sure her lawyer thought made her look innocent and wronged. But I could see through the costume now. I could see the calculating look in her eyes, the way she glanced around the courtroom like she was sizing up her audience. This was just another performance for her, another chance to play the misunderstood wife whose husband had lost his mind over nothing. Too bad I had receipts. Judge Patricia Hendricks took the bench at exactly 2 o'clock. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of expression that said she'd heard every sob story and bullshit excuse in the book. Perfect. This is the matter of Morrison versus Morrison, she announced, looking down at the paperwork. I see we have requests for emergency divorce, a protection order, and... She paused, raising an eyebrow. Charges of animal-related harassment and emotional abuse. This should be interesting. Miranda's lawyer, whose name was apparently Richard Steinberg according to the papers, stood up first. Your Honor, My client is the victim of a gross overreaction to what was intended as a harmless birthday surprise. Mr. Morrison has frozen all marital assets, locked my client out of the family home, and filed false criminal charges in what can only be described as an act of financial and emotional terrorism. Financial terrorism. I almost laughed out loud. The guy was good, I'd give him that. But Danielle was better. Your Honor, she said, standing with the kind of confidence that comes from having all the facts on your side. Mr. Morrison discovered evidence of a premeditated campaign of psychological abuse orchestrated by his wife and her lover. We have text messages detailing their plan to break him down and make him panic, security footage of Mrs. Morrison receiving and preparing the weapon used in this attack, and witness testimony confirming the malicious intent behind these actions. Weapon. Judge Hendricks looked intrigued. We're talking about a birthday present, counselor. A live king snake, Your Honor, placed in a sealed container with minimal air holes and presented to Mr. Morrison without warning. According to animal control experts, the snake was stressed, dehydrated, and would have been extremely aggressive if released. Mrs. Morrison knew her husband had a documented fear of reptiles dating back to childhood trauma. That was news to me. I didn't remember telling Danielle about the time I'd been bitten by a snake at summer camp when I was 8, but apparently she'd done her homework. The woman was scary thorough. Steinberg jumped up. Your Honor, there's no evidence that my client intended any harm. This was clearly a case of mistaken packages, a mix-up at the delivery company. Your Honor, Danielle interrupted. We have video evidence of Mrs. Morrison specifically ordering the snake from an exotic animal supplier, receiving it at her home, and personally wrapping it for presentation. This was not a mistake. This was assault with intent to cause psychological harm. Judge Hendricks held up a hand for silence. I'd like to see this evidence, counselor. The next hour was brutal. Danielle presented everything. The screenshots of Miranda's text messages with Kellen, the security footage showing her wreck. I watched Miranda's face throughout the presentation, saw the moment when she realized her carefully constructed story was falling apart. Her lawyer kept trying to object, to cast doubt on the evidence. But you can't argue with video footage and documented text messages. The worst part, from Miranda's perspective, was probably when Danielle read some of those texts out loud in court. I just want to see him panic for once, Danielle read in a clear, steady voice. I want to see that smug, comfortable expression wiped off his face. Then I move on. With you. Judge Hendricks looked up from the papers she'd been reviewing. Mrs. Morrison, did you send these messages? Miranda's lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head. Yes, Your Honor. I sent them. But it wasn't supposed to be serious. It was just venting. Relationship frustration. Relationship frustration that led you to purchase a live snake and present it to your husband in a sealed box. It was supposed to be funny. A harmless prank. I never thought. You never thought it would terrify him? Cause him to fear for his safety? Force him to call emergency services? The judge's voice was getting colder with each question. Mrs. Morrison, in my 23 years on this bench, I have never seen such a calculated attempt to cause psychological harm disguised as a prank. Steinberg tried to salvage the situation. Your Honor, my client admits to poor judgment, but Mr. Morrison's response has been disproportionate. Freezing all assets, filing criminal charges. Mr. Morrison's response, Judge Hendricks cut him off, was to protect himself from someone who had just demonstrated a willingness to use live animals as weapons. I'd call that prudent, not disproportionate. The gavel came down like a thunderbolt. Motion for protection, order granted. Mrs. Morrison is to have no contact with the petitioner and is hereby removed from the family residence. Motion for emergency divorce granted on grounds of adultery and emotional abuse. Asset freeze remains in effect pending final settlement. Criminal charges will proceed as filed. Miranda started crying then, big dramatic sobs that might have worked on a different judge in a different courtroom. But Judge Hendricks had seen enough. Mrs. Morrison, you are fortunate that your husband is a rational man who chose legal remedies over personal retaliation. In my experience, men who wake up to find snakes in their kitchen don't usually respond by calling lawyers. And just like that, it was over. 10 years of marriage dissolved in less than 2 hours, reduced to a stack of legal documents and a court order that said Miranda couldn't come within 500 feet of me or the house. As we walked out of the courthouse, Danielle was practically glowing with professional satisfaction. That went better than I hoped. Judge Hendricks has a reputation for being tough on domestic abuse cases, and she clearly saw this for what it was. What happens now? Now? Now you go home to your house with your new locks and your frozen assets, and you start figuring out what the rest of your life looks like. Miranda can try to appeal, but with evidence like this, no judge is going to overturn Hendricks' ruling. I looked back at the courthouse steps, where Miranda was standing with her lawyer, probably getting a lecture about realistic expectations and plea bargains. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd handed me that black box just a week ago. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the sound of her laugh when she said I deserved it, and the feeling passed. "Come on," Danielle said, checking her watch. "I'll buy you a drink. You've earned it." "Yeah," I said, walking toward my car and my new life. "I think I have." A week after the courthouse victory, Julian and I were sitting in my living room, sharing a beer and watching the sun set through windows that finally felt like they belonged to me again. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for months, maybe years. No more Miranda humming fake, cheerful songs in the kitchen. No more hushed phone conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. No more walking on eggshells around someone who was secretly planning my destruction. Just peace. Real, honest-to-God peace. "You know what's weird?" Julian said, taking a sip of his Corona and settling back into the couch that used to be ours, but was now just mine. "I keep expecting her to show up. Like she's gonna come bursting through that door with some new scheme or another sob story about how sorry she is." I shook my head, rotating the cold bottle between my palms. "Nah, she's done. Danielle got word that Miranda and Kellen took off for California somewhere. Probably figured it was better to start fresh than stick around and face the music for the criminal charges. Good riddance. Though I gotta say, I'm still pissed that she gets to just run away while you had to deal with all this legal bullshit. Hey, I got what I wanted. She's gone, the house is mine, and I don't have to spend the next 5 years in divorce court fighting over who gets the toaster." I raised my beer in a mock toast. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting karma do the heavy lifting. Julian laughed, that easy sound that reminded me why family mattered more than anything else. "Speaking of karma, did you hear what happened to their little love nest?" "No, what?" "Kellen got fired. Turns out his boss didn't appreciate finding out that one of his employees was helping plan psychological warfare against his customers. Bad for the company image, apparently." I couldn't help but grin. Kellen worked for a financial planning firm downtown, the kind of place where trust and integrity were supposedly the foundation of everything they did. Having an employee who helped his girlfriend terrorize her husband with reptiles probably wasn't great for their professional reputation. So they're both unemployed and on the run in California. That's what you call a fairy tale ending. For us, maybe. For them, it's probably more like a horror movie. Julian got up and grabbed 2 more beers from the kitchen. "But enough about those idiots. What are you going to do now? I mean, you're 40 years old, single for the first time in a decade, got a nice house, and no crazy wife trying to poison your life. The world's your oyster, brother." That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? For the past week, I'd been so focused on the legal battle and getting Miranda out of my life that I hadn't really thought about what came next. What did a 40-year-old divorced guy do with himself when he suddenly had his whole future back? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe travel. I always wanted to see Ireland, but Miranda said it was too expensive and too boring. Maybe I'll take that trip now. That's the spirit. What else? Maybe learn guitar? Take some cooking classes so I can make something besides scrambled eggs and sandwiches. I looked around the living room, really seeing it for the first time in years. Definitely redecorate this place. Get rid of all the flowery curtains and pastel throw pillows. Make it look like a guy actually lives here. Now you're talking. What about dating? I almost choked on my beer. Whoa, slow down there, Cupid. I just got rid of one wife who tried to drive me insane. I'm not exactly rushing to find another one. I'm not talking about wife number 2. I'm talking about having some fun, meeting some people, remembering what it's like to be with someone who actually likes you instead of plotting your psychological destruction. He had a point. For the past few years, maybe longer, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be around someone who genuinely enjoyed my company. Miranda had been going through the motions for so long that I'd started to think that was just what marriage looked like, polite coexistence punctuated by occasional arguments and birthday surprises that turned out to be acts of war. Maybe, I said, but not yet. Right now, I just want to enjoy the quiet. And it was quiet. The kind of silence that healed instead of threatened, that felt peaceful instead of ominous. No more wondering what Miranda was really thinking when she smiled at me. No more trying to decode the meaning behind her casual comments. No more walking into a room and feeling like I'd interrupted something I wasn't supposed to know about. You know what the really messed up part is? I said, watching the last of the daylight fade through my windows. My 40th birthday was supposed to be this big celebration. Midlife milestone, decade of marriage, all that crap. Instead, it turned into the day I found out my wife was a stranger who wanted to see me suffer. But it was also the day you found out who you really were, Julian pointed out. The day you decided you weren't going to be anyone's victim. That's worth celebrating too. I thought about that black box with its silver ribbon and breathing holes, about the snake coiled inside waiting to strike, about Miranda's smile when she handed it to me, and the cold calculation behind her eyes when the mask finally came off. That box didn't just contain a snake, I said slowly. It contained the truth. About her, about our marriage, about what I was willing to accept in my life. And once you saw the truth, I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine when it obviously wasn't. Julian raised his beer. To the truth, then, even when it bites. To the truth, I agreed, clinking my bottle against his. And to the quiet that comes after the storm. We sat there as darkness settled over the house, two brothers sharing a drink and the comfortable silence that comes from surviving something terrible together. Outside, the neighborhood was settling down for the night. Families having dinner, kids doing homework, couples watching TV and taking their ordinary, non-snake-filled lives for granted. And inside my house, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Alone, but not lonely. Free, but not lost. 40 years old, and finally ready to figure out what came next. The gift Miranda had given me wasn't the creature in that box. It was clarity. The ability to see my life as it really was, instead of as I'd been pretending it could be. And that was worth more than 10 years of lies wrapped up in silver ribbon.